of safety and security. Another challenger, be healed and fight on! The void protects its children.
Your soul out! Strike!
A most of my might.
That stretches the sanity.
The long-awaited event is finally here. Stalk and hunt. Time to up the stakes. Be healed and fight on. Handle this. Contemplating so fallible. Stalk and hunt. Shadow, run on.
What's up, fellow tattoo enthusiasts? It's Teak, and while I normally don't make build guides, and this build actually started out as more of a meme than anything, it's evolved into a lot more than that, and I wanted to share it with you all. For this league, I wanted to play a build that met a certain criteria. It's ranged, not reliant on chase or expensive uniques like Mageblood, Headhunter, or Omni, and it's self-obtainable or at least relatively cheap with a high investment ceiling, so I could potentially use it for a league starter next league. After some messing in Path of Building, I ended up deciding to play Spectral Throw. If you weren't aware, in 3.21, Spectral Throw was buffed to reduce the delay between when it hits and when it can hit again from 300 milliseconds down to 225, meaning it can hit the same target more times than it previously could. This means that while using the Spectral Throw deceleration enchant, if we can line up a monster at the apex of Spectral Throw, it can hit up to 5 or even potentially 6 times compared to the 4 or 5 times it was hitting previously. I really didn't want to build it like I've built in the past, so that means no attribute stacking, no Hand of Thought in motion or Wisdom in action, no Corrupting Fever, and no really crazy Elemental Claw. I vaguely remembered a build that Engineering Eternity put out years ago with the Savior and Impales, and thought that might be a good place to start, especially since Spectral Throw is now hitting more often. So I started messing around and ultimately decided that Fizz Spectral Throw using Impales was definitely going to be the play. However, I wanted the build to feel fresh, so I didn't want to use a Savior. After leveling both a Ranger and a Duelist, I did some testing in-game and felt like the extra projectiles from Deadeye wasn't really worth playing a Ranger, especially since we have a tattoo that basically gives us a free one this league. So I landed on Champion. Champ gives some much-needed durability and allows a bit more wiggle room for grabbing nodes to focus more heavily towards damage. It also gives us a free banner, which is definitely welcome because Dread Banner is pretty great for Impale builds. In a league without the extra projectile tattoo, I would likely pick Deadeye or Raider. Even though Raider allows for some easier gearing via the suppression and the ailment avoidance in the Ascendancy tree, it does, however, cost a lot to get Flesh and Flame to grab those 2 extra projectiles from Deadeye, so I think that rolling Deadeye is likely a cheaper option in the long run. Alright, so we'll go over our POB here really quickly. So we'll start with the Ascendancy. I'm going to take Champion and we're going to grab Inspirational so that our banners have no reservation and we get increased effective non-curse auras from our skills. The regen doesn't matter since we're not regenning since we take Vol Pact. We're also going to grab Master of Metal, so Impales we inflict blast an additional hit. It also gives us some flat armor while if we've impaled an enemy recently, and then gives us flat added physical damage for each impale on an enemy, which does add up since we're basically scaling the amount of impales we can inflict. We're going to also grab Unstoppable Hero and Fortitude, so we're always fortified, and then we also get flat armor and evasion while fortified, as well as some attack speed while fortified, and we cannot be stunned while fortified. Those are pretty good utility nodes, pretty good defensive layers, so I would definitely recommend grabbing those. Alternatively, we could get First to Strike, Last to Fall. Intimidate is pretty good for us, and Adrenaline synergizes nice with our gloves. Basically, every time we gain Adrenaline with our gloves, we'll recover 25% of our life. But since we're leeching so much, it honestly doesn't really matter, and we're also ailment immune anyway. All right, and then for our Flesh and Flame, we're going to be grabbing Bane of Legends over here from the Slayer tree. You can choose to go with your other options here, which are Masterful Form or Headsman. So Headsman will give us a better cull and save us a couple points on the tree. and Masterful Form will give us an additional max frenzy charge. We have no way to generate endurance charges in the current state, so I don't think Masterful Form's that great. And honestly, Headsman isn't all that great either. So I ended up going with Bane of Legends. So basically, I can just ignore Reflect on maps, and it just gives me more damage if I've killed recently and more damage against unique enemies. Now, moving on to the tree, I chose to go over the left side here because I wanted to pick up this node for to replace it with the Honored Tattoo of the Barbarian. So this tattoo will give one max frenzy charge and one to max cold res. It requires a dex node, and there's no other dex nodes anywhere else on the tree that we can actually grab for these notable dex nodes. So we end up grabbing this one here. You can, if you're not interested in running that, you can path on the right side here through these dex nodes. You can grab Art of the Gladiator and grab Bravery, and then remove everything from the left side. And that will allow you to path down this way and over to the left instead of going up through the top. So that is an option, but either way, we want to get down to this cluster spot. We also want to take Champion of the Cause for reservation, and you may or may not need this node depending on how well your reservation is working out, whether or not you have eye rolls on your helmet or are using I believe it's anomalous precision, I think I have it in here. Precision. Yeah, anomalous. So whether or not you're running anomalous precision and what level your precision is at to hit that 100% hit cap and crit cap. We're going to travel to the right to our other socket here, but on the way, we're going to pick up +1 to max frenzy charge, as well as this socket for our watchers or one of your flesh or flames. We're also going to grab this life node here, and we're going to pick up Volpact. I think Volpact just makes the build feel overall a lot more comfy. Our leech can counter the damage we're taking in most situations, so I think it's definitely worth picking up. We're going to grab Mark for Death while we're here by this cluster, and that will just give us Cull against Mark enemy. You can also, if you're doing boss fights or things like that, maybe you're doing Maven or whatever it may be, you can grab this 10% chance to gain a frenzy charge when you hit your marked enemy for a reliable way to get frenzy charges against bosses. We're going to head to the right there on our way to our other socket, and we have a lot of good stuff to pick up on the right side here. So we're going to get this life wheel here with the 50 flat life mastery. We're also going to take these two suppressed nodes, and then we're going to take lethality. And lethality is going to give us the rest of the crit chance we need, plus some crit multi in order to get ourselves to 100% crit. Do not take the 15% more projectile speed node, as that will push your spectral throw projectiles outside of your Pride Aura. And in order to keep our spectral throw inside of our Pride Aura, but push our projectile speed, we end up going with a tattoo this league, so it gives us 8% increased projectile speed. For a league without tattoos, I would likely grab these two nodes here. So 10% will still stay within our Pride Aura as long as we're running at 23% normal Pride. So I'll go over that a little bit more in the skill section though. But basically, we grab this tattoo instead this league, and we're going to head over to the right side. Now, on the way, you'll notice some tattoos here. These are just Chaos Res tattoos. I had an abundance of decks because I'm using a Brutal Restraint, so I decided to go with Chaos Res. But you could also use the Lethal Pride and get some double damage nodes. They're definitely a lot more expensive, so that's something to consider if you want to spend a little bit more on the build. On the right side in the Ranger area, we grab this Herbalism node, and we also grab the Life Mastery. The only reason I grab this is because I don't have a life roll on my chest piece, so this just helps. It gives 15%. It's pretty nice. If you do have a life roll, don't grab that node. All right, and we need to basically grab everything in this area. We need to have 7 connected passives here for the tattoo. That gives us an extra projectile. So we end up having to grab 1 bow damage node, which is completely useless, but it's definitely worth it for the extra projectile. We also are going to grab our accuracy and attack speed because we need that to cap out our accuracy. We're going to grab +1 to max frenzy. We're going to grab the jewel socket again for our brutal restraint or lethal pride. I went with brutal restraint. The one that I'm using is 6518, and it gives a couple projectile damage nodes, as well as increased effect of non-curse auras from your skills. And I think there's 3 of those on here. 1, 2, maybe there's 2. But that'll just give us some extra effectiveness of our determination and our grace and stuff. So overall, they're pretty useful. The damage difference between this and a lethal pride can get quite high, but the price also does get really high too. So we're also going to pick up Heartseeker for extra crit multi. And again, that just played into my brutal restraint a bit there, so I grabbed that. And then we're getting Inveterate for to round out our suppress to 100%. And then at the top here, right next to the jewel socket, we grab the socket for large cluster. We grab multi-shot for an additional projectile, and that also gives us some attack speed on the way there. So that's pretty good. And lastly, we go up here for Mark the Prey, which gives us basically 10% more damage. So you can opt out of taking that if you have points that you can, find some better use for. But this gives us a nice amount of damage, and that damage scales pretty well. So it does affect our impale damage as well as our spectral throw damage. So it's a overall nice note to have. And that pretty much takes care of the passive tree. We'll move on here to the gearing section. So if you have any questions about this Atlas tree or whatever, you can check the POB. It'll be in the description, or you can leave a comment or hop in my Discord or whatever it may be. In our main chest links, we use 2 blue, 3 green, and 1 red. We link Divergent Spectral Throw to increase critical strikes and increase critical damage supports, Impale support, Awaken Vicious Projectile support, and Awaken Brutality support. Our gloves are used for aura links, which are 1 blue, 1 green, and 2 red. For these links, it's either a level 3 or 4 Enlighten. I'm using 3, linked to Grace and Determination. You can use Divergent, Grace, and Determination if you have the budget for that. We also socket Pride in those links, and I highly recommend running at least a 23 quality default Pride. The extra quality will help our aura reach the edges of the screen, which will ensure that our spectral throw apex is within the Pride aura. For our main curse links, I use 2 green and 2 red sockets, which are in the helmet. This set of links is for Sniper's Mark and Divergent Mark on hit, linked to Life Tap, alongside Phantasmal Ancestral Protector. Ancestral Protector can go pretty much anywhere. I just throw it in there because it's an extra slot that isn't an aura. For our movement links, I socket them in the main hand, and it's 2 green link sockets for Whirling Blades linked to faster attacks, as well as an extra unlinked blue socket for Frost Blink or Flame Dash. Frost Blink is faster, and you can continue to attack while using it, while Flame Dash has more charges, so it's really down to your personal preference there. For our defensive links, I have it socketed in my offhand with 2 red link sockets. In those sockets, I'm using a level 10 Molten Shell with a level 1 cast when damage taken support. The rest of our gems don't require any actual links, so they can be placed pretty much wherever you want. These gems are Blood Rage, Dread Banner, Berserk, Phantasmal Ancestral Protector, and you'll also need a precision leveled to between 9 and 12 depending on how your mana reservation situation is. So the first piece we're going to go over is one of our 2 unique pieces, and this one is the Perseverance. This goes in the belt slot and gives us % max life, cold res, 1% increased attack damage per 200 of the lowest of armor and evasion rating, and since we're running both Grace and Determination, this ends up giving us quite a bit of attack damage, and it also gives us Onslaught while fortified, and since we're always fortified, we'll always have Onslaught. In my case, I chose to go with a Pride Aura effect implicit on the corrupted version, but you can go with any of the useful corruptions such as like crit chance, attack speed, crit multi during flask effect, or max life, or whatever it may be. They're all pretty much useful. This one was just really cheap, so I ended up going with it. So the second unique we're going to be using in this build is the Tanuahi gloves, and these can definitely be replaced with rares, but they're really cheap early on, and they're a pretty solid pair of gloves. But the cool thing about these gloves is not only do they give us attack speed and their armor and evasion, which will help out our damage, they also give us a little bit of leech, and unique to these gloves, they have a 10% chance to gain adrenaline and a 10% chance to gain onslaught for 2 and 4 seconds respectively whenever your leech is removed by filling your unreserved life. So since we're using Blood Rage, we're constantly degenning due to that, and then we're constantly filling ourselves back up with leech. So as long as we are attacking and leeching, we usually apply this with pretty good uptime. In this slot, you could definitely use some rare gloves, maybe to cover the rest of your resists or suppress or whatever it may be. But Tanuahi are actually a pretty good set of gloves, and adrenaline is huge for our build. I chose to get a pair with +2 to level of socketed aura gems. You can also get the unveiled socketed AoE gems in your helmet instead, but the +2 to socketed aura was relatively cheap, so I ended up grabbing those and stuffing my auras in those gloves. So for the chest piece, it is a little bit more of an elaborate craft, and in my case, I ended up going with awakening a redeemer chest that had increased effective non-curse auras from your skills, with a hunter piece that had attacks have flat percent to critical strike chance. Now, the reason I chose a hunter instead of an elder is because hunter also comes with a prefix that allows you to apply an additional curse, and it is very easy to get this on our prefixes since it is the only caster mod in the pool. Now, I go a lot more in depth into how to craft this in my crafting video, so make sure you check that out if you're interested in that. But basically, most importantly on this piece, we want an additional curse as well as attacks have increased to critical strike chance. Now, I chose to elevate this so I had even more critical strike chance. I do believe it's possible to hit crit cap with a good roll on your weapon without elevating it, but in my case, I ended up elevating it anyway. So now, as I mentioned in the Alice Tree video, I didn't roll a life roll, so I ended up taking the Mastery node for 15% increased life if your armor does not have any life roll, and instead I rolled armor and evasion and then crafted on our avoid elemental ailments to round out our cap to 100%. Our boots are pretty flexible and fairly easy to craft. What we're going to want to do is start with a fractured chance to suppress spell damage. In my case, I already had a pair with perfect suffixes, so I just went with that. But you're going to want to use either an essence to force a resist or an essence to force chance to avoid elemental ailments. So that would be a loathing essence. And what you want to do is just spam that until you get another acceptable suffix, and then you hopefully roll into a decent move speed roll. If you don't, you can always wild bristle matron or craft suffixes can't be changed and then use a veiled chaos. You block one stat, you unveil, get your move speed, and then you craft life or whatever it may be, whatever else you want on there. So next we'll move on to our jewelry. And I want to touch on an important thing first before we start. We need our jewelry to have an open prefix. What we're looking for is the Elrion mod, which gives non-channeling skills have -7 to total mana cost. Now, if we catalyst this up to at least 15%, this ends up bumping it to -8, and that means that our spectral throw will be completely free even with all our links on it. So for our amulets, we're looking for basically just life, attributes, resistances. For damage rolls, we can go with flat fizz damage to attacks. We can also get crit multi if you want to craft it with essences or if you end up rolling into crit multi. And then for the anoint, we're going to go with sovereignty, which is 3 silver oils. This is going to give us 12% increased mana reservation, efficiency of skills, as well as some increased effective non-curse auras from your skills. For our rings, this is where we're going to fill in our intelligence requirement. I did a little bit of math, and if you look at my crafting video, we're exactly 42 on each piece away from being capped, so we need 84 total int. So what we do is we craft it with the second highest tier of int essences, which means that we'll get at least a 43 roll, and we just keep spamming those until we get a nice combination of stats. As I mentioned before, we need an open prefix, so we're looking for things like life, we're looking for maybe other attributes that you need to fill, or just elemental resistances. Also on the prefixes, flat fizz is really good here as well. We ended up going with a vulnerability on hit ring in one of the slots, and the other one we just grabbed a chaos resistance ring to help fill out our chaos resistance. So for our shield, we're basically just looking to fill out all the other stats that we're missing on the rest of our gear. So whether it be suppression, whether it be ailment avoidance, since my boots have 2 resists on it, I had to get ailment avoidance somewhere. So I ended up finding actually a really good deal on this shield. And the fact that it's on a mirrored spike shield base is also really nice too, because that bumps up my suppress a little bit as well. So other valuable stats that you might find as far as suffixes go are attack speed. Obviously, that's going to be a really good stat for us. You could go max res is another good one. Any of the max reses or maybe maximum all res. And then for the shield base, that's completely up to you. If you need a little bit of suppress, or if you want to go with an armor evasion one to get maybe a little bit more damage or something like that, maybe a little tankier, you could definitely go with that as well. And then obviously just a little bit of life. I ended up going with a life roll and crafted on the hybrid life roll. So Like I said, shield is basically just to fill out whatever you're missing. So for our helmet, there's a couple important things here. Number one is the enchant. As I went over before, the reduced spectral throw projectile deceleration is definitely the best enchant for us. And we're going to want to roll the rest of our mana reservation efficiency on here. So in terms of suffixes, we'll use an essence of spite. We'll roll that until we get a couple of good suffixes. In this case, I just needed a little bit of fire and I wanted to overcap my lightning. So I rolled for fire and lightning. And that was good enough for me. I crafted life on it and I was done. In terms of our implicits, we'll use Icarus for mana reservation efficiency. And in my case, I needed it at least 7%. So I might as well bump that up to 8% with a Blessed Orb. And then for our Embers, we're going to roll for reduced mana cost of attacks, which will push our Spectral Throw down to 0 mana cost. So last but definitely not least is the weapon slot. It's actually the most important. So there is a cheaper version of this that you can go with, and that is going to be the Paradoxica sword with a percent fizz roll on the prefix and an attack speed roll on the suffix. Make sure when you're looking for Paradoxicas, you don't get one with attack speed when a rare or unique enemy is nearby, as that one is a global attack speed modifier and not local. So that definitely won't help you out very much at all. In terms of the rares, we're going to want as much fizz damage as possible, and our priority for our suffixes are going to be attack speed, critical strike chance, and then crit multi or double damage, whatever you can end up getting. So in the case of one of the swords that I've been using this league, the Spiraled Foil, I ended up hitting it with Essences of Contempt, the tier 1 essences, and it rolled into a decently high attack speed as well as a T1 critical strike chance. So I just crafted fizz on that and I used that for quite a while. In terms of my other sword, it has a much better fracture for hybrid fizz roll, and I've been trying to roll it with no luck, but basically I'm doing the same thing, spamming contempts and hoping for the best. I'm hoping for a tier 1 fizz percent roll, but it's definitely a very, very low odds to get that. So if you are crafting this, I cover it all in my crafting video, so check that out if you're interested in that. I go over the bases and like what you should be doing in terms of finishing your suffixes and stuff like that. So hopefully that'll help you out in getting your hands on a really good weapon. So next up, we're going to go over our jewels. And first up for our jewels, we'll cover the Watcher's Eye. Since we've already done the Timeless Jewel, I won't touch on that too much, but I'm basically using a Brutal Restraint with the Seed 6518, and the Notable does not matter. So that just gives us some projectile damage as well as some increased effect of non-curse auras. For Watchers, our prio stat is going to be Impale's last 2 additional hits while affected by Pride. Next on the list is chance to deal double damage while affected by Pride, followed by increased attack speed while affected by Precision, and then crit multi while affected by Precision. And lastly, we have increased physical damage and increased attack damage, and those are by Pride and Precision respectively. And now moving on to our large clusters. So for our large clusters, we want to be using 8 passive axe and sword attacks, deal 12% increased damage with hits and ailments. You don't want more than 8 passive because that's going to cause you to use more skill points than you want to use to get to those keystones and as well as the jewel sockets. So we're going to be using a priority list for this one as well. The first one in our priority list is going to be Blood Scent. Blood Scent gives us rage on hit when we attack with axes or swords, so that's going to be a really useful notable to have on one of our large clusters. Next up on the list, we have Feed the Fury. Feed the Fury is going to give us leech. It's also going to give us attack damage while leeching and attack speed while leeching. And we're leeching the majority of the time unless we're not attacking, which in that case, we're not doing any damage or we're dead. So you're basically going to have really, really good uptime on that regardless. And that's going to be one of the highest priority ones behind Blood Scent. Next up on the list is a toss-up. So we have Run Through, which gives us Impale effect, and we have Martial Prowess, which gives us attack speed, it gives us attack damage, and global accuracy rating. So I honestly think Martial Prowess might be a little bit ahead of Run Through here, but you'll have to check with POB to see which one's better for you if you're looking at clusters. And last on the list, but still useful, is Fuel the Fight. And Fuel the Fight is going to be another leech node. It's going to give us some attack speed and some damage while leeching. And for our small clusters, we only use a couple. So We want at least one cluster, which gives us mana reservation efficiency, and we use a two passive so we don't have to spend too many points to get to it. Now, the notable that you take here, there it kind of depends on what you think is most useful for you. So first up, we have destructive aspect, which gives us area of effect of our aura skills, which means pride is going to affect a larger circle. So it also gives us pride has 50% increased mana reservation efficiency, which we need to fit in all of our auras. The other one is sublime form, which is going to give us 10% to all elemental resistances, and it will cause grace to have 50% increased mana reservation efficiency. So which one you use depends on whether or not you hit your resist goals, and yeah, other than that, it's basically just whatever you feel like is the best stat for you. I do like the Pride Aura effect, but right now I'm using the Grace one so that I can further overcap my resistances for altars. So the other small cluster that I'm using is a life cluster, a two passive life cluster with Feast of Flesh, and that just gives us life gain on hit as well as percent maximum life to make us feel a little bit more comfy when we're mapping. And life gain on hit is great if we run into expedition node that you cannot leech for monsters or things like that. It's definitely helpful to have that extra life gain on hit for that instant like little bit of life. All right, and that's pretty much everything. We've covered everything. I know it's been a really long video. If you've stuck around to the end, I really appreciate you a lot. I have my crafting video as well, so make sure you check that out if you need any help with that. And if you need any further help, make sure you leave yourself a comment or leave me a message in my Discord. I'm usually pretty responsive, so I should be able to get back to you in a reasonable amount of time. I hope you're enjoying this league and take it easy.